Welcome to episode 41 of The Lowdown Show. I'm Neil Graham. This week I speak to Rosie Gabrielle, a woman who is not your usual globetrotter. She doesn't overplan. She doesn't much plan at all. She doesn't even carry a toolkit. Leaving the details to serendipity isn't for everyone, but it works for her. Gabrielle habitually pushes herself to breaking and beyond. Why? Stick around and she'll tell you in her own words. And we'll learn why Pakistan is more than just another country to check off her to-do list. But before we get into our conversation with Rosie, a word from our sponsor. Picture this, you're halfway through a DIY motorcycle fix, tools scattered everywhere, and boom, you realize you're missing a part. Well, don't fret, because whatever it is, it's on eBay. They've got simply everything. Brake rotors, lights and tire exhaust systems, whatever you need. And it's guaranteed to fit, which means no more crossing your fingers hoping you order the right thing. All the parts you need at prices you'll love, guaranteed to fit every time. eBay, things people love. Let's get into it. I was intrigued by one of your videos where you talked about your father taking your mother to the hospital for you to be born on the back of his Harley. Is it a Harley?
Yeah.
Can you tell that story?
Well, from what I know, he had a 1969 pan shovel. He was a big biker. He was very well known in the biking community, and definitely get my wild spirit from him. But yeah, that was kind of their means of transportation. And funny story, my mom actually thought she just had a bit of gas. And lo and behold, I popped. So she thought she was just going for a routine checkup. So they hopped on the back of the bike and they're going to the hospital to check it out. And well, it wasn't gas.
That's a great story. It's hard to follow that story up with another question. So, and this was in Vancouver?
It was in Penticton. So I was born in the interior of BC.
And then I also read that you ended up working as a photographer in Vancouver.
And then I actually worked in the Middle East as a photographer. I never brought it over here.
Oh, okay. And then at some point you decided to stop doing that and hit the road. Is that right?
Mm-hmm.
So tell me about what was the catalyst that made you decide to stop working as a photographer and you wanted to travel? What was the process?
Yeah, so at that time, I kind of hit rock bottom in my life, and I'd been working quite successfully as a photographer in the Middle East for many years, which was actually a dream job. I loved what I did, but you know, as some of us do, we get a little caught up in the cycle of success. And although, even though I was doing what I loved, I wasn't living the way I wanted to, how my heart wanted to. So at that point, I was really struggling in life. And when I talk struggling, like I literally couldn't leave my house. I was riddled with anxiety, depression. I had been battling chronic illness pretty much my whole life. And a friend of mine passed away. He was a young fellow in his early 30s. And it was a car accident. And it kind of made me reevaluate my own life and look at things. And I was going through our Facebook messages over the years. And every year was the same thing. It was like, oh, I wish I was, riding my motorcycle around the world. What am I doing? I was like, oh, hello. Did you just read that? Like, why aren't you living this life? And what if I died tomorrow? Like, life is not guaranteed for any of us. Only death is. And what if I died tomorrow? Have I done everything that I wanted to do? I was like, oh my gosh, no, I haven't. And many, many, many years before that, I had done my first solo trip across Southeast Asia when I was 19 on a motorcycle. And I was like, I want to do that. And I believe that I see the world differently. And I feel like I can share something from a perspective of a vulnerable solo female. And what would that look like? Maybe I should start a YouTube channel. Maybe I should document this experience and share it with people. So that was the initial catalyst that kind of like made me question things and then go off on this great big adventure.
19 is a pretty young age to start solo traveling on a motorcycle. I have a 19-year-old daughter, and I couldn't imagine her doing it. But
Yeah.
maybe
I didn't tell my mom for many months. I left out those details.
I think that's wise of you for your mother's health. I think that was wise. But Rosie, take me back to that first trip. Where did you go? What did you ride? And what were you looking for?
I was just after high school, and I wanted to do, a big adventure. I wanted to go backpacking because that's what people did back then. And I was like, okay, Southeast Asia is probably a good place to start. And so I went with a massive backpack, and I was ready for a great adventure. And I was just, when I got there to Thailand, and you take a bus from point A to point B, and you're just with a bunch of other tourists, and you miss everything in between. And I was like, well, this isn't really the adventure I had in mind. And I had never been on two wheels before. And when I got up north, I actually rented a bike for a weekend. And, it was one of those like local semi automatic motor scooter bike things, 125cc. And I did like a weekend trip, and I was like, oh my gosh, this is how I have to travel. And back then, many years ago, this was back before, now it's quite popular to ride around there, but back then not really many people were doing it. And there was no smartphones. There was dial-up internet. I could contact my mom every few days. I'm alive.
Right.
And I just went, and I did 12,000 kilometers. I had a paper map, and I just went. And it wasn't actually legal, or you're not, because the bike was plated in Thailand. I wasn't legally allowed to bring it across the borders. And I guess that's one of the benefits of being a sweet little girl. I ended up, I don't know, I pulled some strings, and I managed to get it done. And that opened a whole new world for me.
The Lowdown Show is presented by advrider.com and supported by ebaymotors.com. One of the things I think that's, at least for me, that sets the videos you make apart is your, well, I don't know what to call it, extreme vulnerability. I mean, in a lot of your videos, and traveling is arduous, and especially the kind of traveling you do. And in some videos, I mean, it almost seems like you're coming apart. You're exhausted. And do you hesitate to show that kind of content, or has it always been natural for you to just show it as it is?
I think some people look at vulnerability as a weakness. I believe it's a strength. At the end of the day, we're all human. We're all on this experience, living this human life on Earth, and we're all going through things. And for me, it just feels natural, and there's nothing to be shameful about. Or, so many of these travelers or adventure riders, they show how great it is and amazing and all the highlights, and yeah, it really is. But and I think you don't have to be a sensitive person to go through the highs and lows of traveling. And yeah, you pointed out I quite literally unraveled and fell apart. As I mentioned earlier, I lived with chronic illness my whole life. So that was a big aspect that maybe a lot of people didn't understand in the beginning, and they've grown to learn. But for me, this is just my life, and it's always been so, how can you say that? It's been full of many experiences, and that was a part of me wanting to share this experience with people, is because for me, I didn't have anyone to say like, yeah, you can do it. You might feel like you're dying, but it's okay. You can go out there and do it, and you can believe in yourself, and look what you can do with your life. Doctors told me, oh, you can't even run, you can't do this, you're pretty much going to be dependent on medications and therapies. And for me, that wasn't a life, and that wasn't an answer. And it's so easy to give up hope. And so if I could inspire a little bit of hope for people and show them, yes, there's a lot of struggles, but there's also a lot of beauty. And when you can overcome your fears and face them head on, it's magical what can unfold for you.
Tell me about Pakistan. I mean, Pakistan plays a major role in a lot of the work that you've created. And you found more than just time away in Pakistan. You actually came back with a husband.
I did.
So obviously Pakistan really resonated with you. Tell me a bit about that trip, And in particular, why that the country speaks to you in that way.
Yeah, so well, I certainly wasn't expecting to meet my husband when I traveled there. It was kind of serendipitous how everything just unfolded with that. I was in a crossroads of where I was going to travel to that winter, and I was just thinking, okay, universe, give me a sign. And then a week later, I was invited to this trip to Pakistan just for like a 1 week media tour thing. And I was like, I don't really do media tours, but if you're going to pay for my visa and my flight, so long as I can do my own thing after, I'm sold. So like, okay. And I had this big dream of riding a motorbike across the country, but I don't research, and I don't really I'm not a good traveler like that. I just like to show up, and I usually pick the best travelers in the area, and I just pick their brains. I was like, okay, what to do. And that person I reached out to ended up being my now husband. But he is the best. He is honestly the best traveler there. And
So let me get this straight. So you don't do any research prior to going to the country, or you just go and make it
never,
up when you get there?
never, because I mean, one, it's a lot of work when you're covering so much ground to do that much research. It's really overwhelming. There's so much online. It really overwhelms me. And then also you get when you, I mean, it's good to maybe research about a few things, like the culture and what is acceptable there, and just but when in Rome, you just sort of show up and fit yourself in. But yeah, for me, it's very overwhelming to do any research. So sometimes it gets me in a bit of trouble, but I like to really just go with the flow, and I don't plan a lot. I literally don't plan a lot. So for that trip, I had a general direction. And yeah, what called me to it, it was such a wild adventure for me. The country's so beautiful. For myself, going there, the most important thing for me that I could showcase was the humanity of the people, because Pakistan hasn't had the greatest rep in media over the years, and people have like this projection and idea of not only what the country is like but what the people. And I when I went there, a big thing in the beginning, everyone would say, oh, show people in the world we're not terrorists, we're good people. And they were just heartbroken that this is how the world perceived them, when in fact it's not the case. Like, they are the most kind, giving, generous, open-hearted people. And I received only love when I was traveling across there, and long-lasting love, because I ended up getting married after. But yeah, Adil kind of shared with me, places, to visit and a general route, and I went off on my way.
One of the things that I'm really struck with the work you do is it's very well filmed, and it's very
Mhm.
extensively filmed.
Yeah, you said you were a documentary filmmaker.
That's right. I've made
Right?
documentary films, and
Yeah,
on everything from addiction to all sorts of things.
yeah.
And the one thing that really struck me is, I know when I travel by motorcycle, the last thing I want to do is stop and pull out a camera.
Mhm.
It's exhausting. First of all, just travel by motorcycle is exhausting. So how do you incorporate those two things?
Mm.
Because it's the end of the day, and you're late, and it's behind,
Yeah.
and you have to film it.
Yeah.
Does it ever seem too much for you?
I'd say that's always the hardest part of what I do. Like the traveling, everything is, things happen. It gets intense. It gets challenging sometimes, but all of that is pretty easy. You just go with the flow. I'd say definitely filming is the hardest part of what I do, and a lot of part of those frustrations that came out, and what how my journeys are. But it's so much a part of the process as well, because people are always like, "Oh, why don't you just put your camera down and enjoy and this and this?" For me, it brings me so much joy to share with people, and to have that creative process. But it is finding that balance, because I am a huge perfectionist. I'm a pain in my own butt. And when I'm like, no, one camera angle won't do, I need 5, and I got to tell this story. And, I was just so driven to create something. And, I don't want to go half ass. I don't want to just create 20 minutes of helmet footage. I mean, some people do that. It's great, but not my thing,
Thank you for that, by the way.
It's just, I want to tell a story. And not only do I want to tell a story, but I really want to move people.
No, there's one specific thing about your filmmaking that I need to ask you about, and that's there's one, and you can remind me where it is. I can't remember which video it was, but you were going along this sort of the edge of this mountain and this precipice. My stomach kind of went up to about here when just watching it. And there's obviously a drone following you along. Are you by yourself while you're doing that?
Yeah.
So you're controlling the drone and riding on the edge of this mountain. Next time, do it and juggle at the same time, so you can do
okay.
So, because it's not complicated enough.
No, and I actually, because the follow me function doesn't really work on the drones very well, and I don't like just a straight line. Like, I like to make a little fancy. So
are you, just to clarify, you're watching a monitor on your handlebar, I presume?
Yeah. So I take a bungee cord and I just strap the controller to my tank bag. And then I've got obviously my hand on the throttle, and then one hand, actually, I'll send you a video after so you can see I filmed it. So you can see me, and I wiggle the joysticks like this, and I'm looking down, and I've got I know the safety guys out there are like, oh, what the heck? I do have like a 360 awareness. It's like I become one with the bike and everything. And I've never crashed flying my drone. Knock on wood. But yeah, it's and I do it like I'll never do it on a road with traffic, or obviously if there's a 200-meter drop next to me, I'm extra vigilant. But
well, I mean, let's be honest. That drop would have probably been the end of you had you gone over that. So I mean,
I think I'm sticking around. I believe everything in life happens for a reason. If it's my time, it's my time. But I really don't feel like it. So I mean, I don't patronize. I mean, I am a bit daring and risk taking for sure. Ask my mom; she gets a bit. She's just like, Rosie will be Rosie. But I do feel like that's within my comfort zone and my abilities. And yeah, I always ride within my abilities. Like, I don't go crazy off road. I'm by myself. I'm very overloaded. I don't know if you notice a small house on the back of my bike most of the time, but yeah, I don't do any crazy stuff.
For our 7th inning stretch, some words provided by our sponsor. Picture this. You're in the garage, your favorite room in the house, which of course isn't in the house. But anyway, you're tuning up your engine with parts that you found on eBay. Every piece is just locking perfectly into place. You step back to admire your work, hands covered in grease. And because you're committed to riding that thing further than the odometer can even handle, you start thinking to yourself, you know what? I could probably use some new brakes, maybe a shock. This baby deserves a new air filter. So you head right back to eBay. You can find everything you need there. It's unreal, from headlights to air filters to exhaust systems, all the way to those carbon fiber rims you've been fantasizing about. eBay is the stocked garage of your dream. And you've got eBay Guaranteed Fit, because eBay knows DIY fixes can be major and mods, of course, are always intense. So you need to know that those parts are guaranteed to fit every time before you dive in wrench first. And on the off chance you order a part and it doesn't fit, send it back. Simple as that. We know what you love more than your bike itself, and that is, of course, riding it. You're serious when it comes to engine maintenance and locked in when you're headed into a build. And that's exactly why you start with eBay, minor fix or complete overhaul. You want to get your ride back in the road, and you've got eBay Guaranteed Fit. So eBay created My Garage, where all you have to do is add your ride's info and get the exact parts that fit. When you see that green check, you're just a click away from that part clicking perfectly into place. Now, of course, that you know all this, imagine standing at that open garage door looking at the bike you love more than anything, knowing that anything is possible, whether it's keeping it on the road forever or turning it into something that's never been on the road before. Because with eBay, your garage just got a whole lot bigger. Get all the parts you need at prices you'll love, guaranteed to fit every time. eBay, things people love. Now back to my conversation with Rosie Gabrielle. how would you categorize your skill on a motorcycle? Are you a really good motorcyclist, or are you an adequate motorcyclist?
Well, if you can ride uphill on a rock wall one-handed while filming it and not fall, depends who you ask, really. I don't do things the right way. And I think in my career, you can call it, of riding, I received a lot of flack for always doing it the wrong way and not doing it good enough, especially, yeah, being a woman in this industry. And back when I started 10 years ago, now a lot more women are riding, but we're still very much the minority. Um, but I'm a confident rider, definitely. I say my skill really improved in the last couple of years, since I started dirt biking. Before that, when I was by myself, I didn't push my skill because I was by myself on big, crazy, heavy bikes that I couldn't touch the ground on, and I was overloaded. So I never got that chance to really push myself. It wasn't until, I guess it was 6 years ago, I went to the KTM rally. I was invited to ride the 690 Enduro and do this KTM race. And KTM, they're, on a league of their own. And so for the first time, that was my first introduction to Enduro riding. And so for the first time, I actually got to test my limits and be trained by Chris Birch and like go on these crazy ass routes. And I'm like, I can do whatever I want because there's a safety team that can help me. So I can really try this out. And then I got into dirt biking and it got a lot better. But you can't teach an old dog new tricks. I still, because I'm self-taught and kind of adapted to the environment and style of riding I did, which is very different. I kind of got stuck, you can say, but I make it work and it's comfortable for me. Recently, I was invited to Tour Tech in New Hampshire to their rally, Dirt Days. And Ben Drago, I don't know if you're familiar with him. He's a big trainer in the US. And he was there, and I was doing this obstacle course. And he's like, oh, you can't ride with your modular helmet up. Oh, you got to stand here in the rock pit and you got to do this. And I was like, Ben, no, it's okay. I know what I'm doing. Just watch me. And I did all that stuff. And he's like, well, I can't argue with the results. You do you. Okay. And I was like, yeah, I get it done. Maybe not in the most, elegant way, but I get it done.
What about I mean, the one thing that is a real issue, especially for how tall are you, Rosie?
I'm 5'7".
So you're fairly tall, but a lot of riders are fairly. I'm 6 feet, and I don't have an issue with seat heights. But motorcycles, especially loaded, when you're traveling, and a lot of riders are a lot shorter than you are. And I mean, the whole seat height issue is a real kind of thing in motorcycling, isn't it?
Yeah, I am lucky. I am a little taller of a female rider, like taller inseam. But I have struggled on a few bikes. And the first adventure bike I was on, it was on a KLR, and my feet were like that far. It was like tippy, and it's intimidating and it's tough. But I think you learn your way around it. That's mostly why I dropped the bike actually in the beginning. I never dropped it while I was actually riding. It was like either slow maneuvers or you go to put your foot down. And because you can't touch, if it's on a slope, you just drop the bike. And it's just like, oh, man, that sucks.
Yeah, there's no feeling really like that foot hitting air, is there? When it's like, oh no.
Yeah,
Oh, no. And it's only happened to me once, but I have empathy for every 5'2" rider because there was that kind of like pit in your stomach when you think I'm going over.
Yeah. Just gotta let it go down. But it's the worst at the end of the day when you're so tired. And back then I couldn't. Well, actually, I didn't realize that I knew how to pick up the bike, so I would need to get help. And when you're by yourself in the middle of the mountain range.
But what did you do? I mean, were there ever instances where you went down and there was no one around? And
plenty of times.
how
Yeah.
do you deal with that?
Well, the crazy phenomenon is like I literally wouldn't see people for half a day or hours in these mountain ranges. And it seemed like the minute something happened, out of nowhere, someone would come to help. And it was always really amazing for me because Obviously I would get to experience that kindness of these people helping me, and then they would invite me back to, their homes and their villages to meet their families. So it was actually a good thing that I didn't know how to pick up my bike, because it just opened the world for so many more experiences for me. And I was like, okay, well, I'm not really in any rush and nothing's broken here. So let's, let's see. A lot of people I've got asked recently, they're like, where's your inReach? Where's your Garmin inReach? I was like, huh? What? I don't have one.
I have a theory, and I'd like to. I suspect you agree with this, at least in part. But we're so used to in conventional society. We all have roadside assistance cards, and we get a flat tire, and the car breaks. You take your cell phone, and you make a call. And yet there is something, and I'm old enough to know all the years before the internet, when if your car broke down at 3:00 in the morning in the country, you started walking. And I think that some of the times when I've been most resourceful and the most self-reliant have been those instances when you're kind of screwed, and you just have to figure it out. And I've surprised myself in how resourceful I can be in a way that I didn't even know that I could. And I'm guessing that's a big part of your traveling, isn't it?
Oh yeah, I don't even carry tools. Another foolish thing.
Okay, stop. I can't take any more.
Motorcycle community is like, stop. I just no more.
So you don't have a puncture kit. You don't have anything.
No, I don't know how to fix a puncture. You think after 20 years of riding I could do that, but honestly, if I were to learn to fix it 20 years ago, I've had 2 flats in 20 years. You think I could remember how to do that? And then every bike I'm on is different. And in South Africa is when I had the flat, and there was a big South African dude. That guy couldn't even pop the bloody bead on this Yamaha. So I was like, if he can't do it, what am I doing? Like, and I think, with all these modern conveniences and all this know-it-how thing, it really doesn't leave a lot of room for using our own resourcefulness, or, getting to, like I said, it's these experiences of the people who've helped me along the way. That is the journey. That is the story. That is the experience. If I had everything figured out or did everything myself, well, that's great. But my experience was so much more enriching for myself, because I got to experience all that. So it's like maybe a bit naive and a bit foolish, but I've never really been in a situation that was bad.
The Lowdown Show is presented by advrider.com and supported by ebaymotors.com. One of the most sort of compelling, at least to my opinion, sort of excerpts or the content that you've created was based around, I believe correct me if I'm wrong, but I think you were with your husband, you were living in Pakistan, in the city, and then you moved to this place in the country, in the mountains, and then he was gone for an extended period of time, 3 or 4 weeks or something like that. And that watching that was difficult because of how hard you were struggling. You had a couple of dogs and you had some farm animals, and I mean, take us through
running
that.
water, no heat.
Yeah. Well, take us through what happened, and then there was kind of a dramatic finale. So if you wouldn't mind walking us through that.
Yeah, so we moved up to a small village called Gulmit. It's in Hunza. It's in the Karakoram range of the Himalaya mountains. Very, very kind of a small village, like you have local mud houses and these sort of things. Very traditional village. And we shifted up there in the summer, and then the months got colder. My husband got a job for a month, and there I was to fend for myself. And I thought, okay, I'm a tough girl. I can do this. Like, didn't think anything of it. Like, the day after he left, it hit like -10, and our house, in the winter months, we barely had half an hour of electricity a day. And so everything seemed to be fine before he left, and then he left and everything kind of fell apart. And that's when the electricity went. It got so cold we had no running water. We have no heating in our house except for this little stove in our kitchen, which our wood never showed up. So I didn't even have like wood to make a fire in the beginning. And it was kind of a disaster. And this was like a dark night of the soul. Oh my gosh. It just like, oh, that was a hard time. But yeah, it's humbling. We spent last was it last winter or the winter before? We decided to spend a whole winter there. We're there for 2 months, and it was crazy. I mean, you're just surviving at that point. But it's also neat to see how the locals live. A lot of people around the world live like this. It's simplified life. So every day, you just play Scrabble by the fire. That month was particularly hard though, because I had I had to just get through it. I had me and my dogs, and then yeah, at the end we had that very unfortunate incident where the house caught fire. Eventually, when we got the firewood, but my dog survived. My dog is okay. Winston's okay, but it was very traumatizing. Certainly built a lot of character, and it made me a lot tougher for these Canadian winters. I come home and I am so grateful for, okay, the internet can be crap sometimes, but
But if the worst thing we're complaining about is the internet.
oh yeah. And that experience there, like, it just gifted me so much, because so much of our lives we take for granted day to day.
Yes.
And I just remember that first day after leaving, and my husband and I got a hotel room, and we had a shower for the first time in 2 months, because you can't shower. You can't, like, it's just inside the house is -20. You could see your breath. We had icicles growing on our walls. And yeah, the first time we had a shower, and then we got into clean sheets, and we're like, oh my God, clean sheets. This feels amazing. People don't know how lucky they are.
One question I always like to ask adventurers is the notion of how it is to reintegrate back into the society from which you came. So you come from a Western country, you come from Canada, you're back living in BC now. With all of your experiences, what's it like to go from sometimes extreme roughing it, back to where you are now, where, as you just said, the biggest concern is weak internet.
Yeah.
What's that like?
It's hard. It's extremely hard, actually, especially in the beginning. I always struggle when I come home. There's always too much to think about. When I'm on the road, it's, where do I sleep, and have I eaten yet today? Okay, yeah, I'm hungry, I'm going to eat. That's about the extent of what I have to think about when I'm on the road. You've got filming and this, that. I tend not to be too active with work when I'm on the road, hence why I'm behind, because I can't really juggle the two. But when you're on the road, even roughing it, you just feel alive. You're there, you're in it, you're living it, and it feels great. When you come back home, it's just sort of like you don't have that. Yeah.
Do you feel, is it that you feel too coddled when you get back? Does our society feel too soft to you?
Quite, yeah. I mean, the roads are definitely a lot more boring here in Canada. There's so many rules. You gotta, you gotta play by the rules here in Canada.
You can't fly your drone over top of your head when you're riding.
No. And I think generally too, although it's not always the case, like when you're always on the road, like everyone you're meeting, you're interacting with, everyone's like happy generally. And then, you come back to Canada and everyone's just sort of living their life. And it's just a different dynamic. But I do always struggle quite a bit when I come home, and it's another chance just to kind of like sit and process everything I've been through as well. And I think that's such a thing, because you go away. I was just away for 6 weeks in Sri Lanka, come back to -3 in Canada. But like every day you're out there, you're doing something, like it's so magical. Everything is so new. And then you come back home and you're like, oh, I gotta clean the house. Oh, there's dust. Oh, there's, this work and this. And it's just so much. I don't know, for me personally. It's just different.
You're still a young woman, and lots of years ahead of you with any luck. What do you want to see, or where do you want to go? Are there places that how do you see your life as an adventurer, in years in the future? Where are you going to go?
Oh golly, big question. I don't know. I don't know. I never know. If it's one thing I know, it's that I don't know. I never know where I'm going. I love to see life just unfold the way it's meant to. I would love to see the world. I feel like, I mean, I've barely cracked the surface. I've had a few adventures here and there, but I really haven't been too many places. There's a whole world out there. But I don't know. We'll see. I don't know where I want. I want to do so much. I recently got into singing, and I was really enjoying that. And I want to travel more with my dogs. I want to teach my bigger dog to ride with me. So we'll be probably 3 up on my bike. That should be interesting. But yeah, I don't know. The world is my oyster. There's so much adventure to be had, but I just don't know where that is just yet.
You can find Rosie Gabrielle's videos on YouTube. In closing, a few words from our sponsor. Picture this: you're halfway through a DIY motorcycle fix, tools scattered everywhere, and boom, you realize you're missing a part. Well, it's okay, because whatever it is, it's on eBay. They've got simply everything: brake rotors, lights, and tire exhaust systems, whatever you need. And it's guaranteed to fit, which means no more crossing your fingers and hoping you order the right thing. All the parts you need at prices you'll love, guaranteed to fit every time. eBay, things people love. Thank you for listening to The Lowdown Show.